welcome to another edition of the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights show. Today we have a great program for you. As we've been trying to bring you different agencies, today we have Disability Rights with Nebraska, and Sharon Omberger is our guest. Welcome to the show, Sharon. How are you today?
I am doing well, thank you.
So thank you for being here. You know, I know it takes time from being away from the office, but will you please introduce yourself and what is it that you do?
Sure. Well, my name is Sharon Omberger. I'm the Community Engagement Director for Disability Rights Nebraska. And we are the protection and advocacy system in Nebraska. There's one in every state. We have an office here in Lincoln, and we have a tiny office in Scottsbluff as well, and we serve the whole state.
So for 2 offices for the whole state. Whoa. So Scottsbluff, you said you have an office there also.
Yes.
How many people are in that office?
One person in the Scottsbluff office, and I think right now we have 17 people in the Lincoln office.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. Will you please let our audience know what is Disability Rights Nebraska? I think sometimes there's a misconception of really what that means to some people, but I think it's a very it's a neat office because of the services that you provide, and I think our audience would really appreciate to hear what that is.
Well, we are, as I said, we're part of the National Protection and Advocacy System. So there is, in any state or territory that you go to, there is an office analogous, similar to ours. We are an independent nonprofit. So we are not connected with the state of Nebraska or any of the health and human services in Nebraska. And our primary focus areas are keeping people with disabilities free from harm and making sure that they're included in the community, and then making sure that people have a voice and supporting people in developing their voice. So those are our top 3 priorities in terms of the people we serve. And we serve people with any kind of disability. And that can be intellectual disability, developmental disability, mental illness, brain injury, invisible disabilities of other sorts. So, and we can provide information and referral. We can provide some self-advocacy assistance. So we have a legal advocacy department if a person were to call in during our intake hours, which are Monday through Friday from 8 to 12. If they were to call in with a question about that's disability related, they would end up talking to one of our advocates. And then the advocate would gather the information from them about their concern and some other, since we are funded by federal grants, we're required to gather some demographic information. And then that information goes to a weekly meeting of a legal services team. And that team includes the advocates and then several attorneys. And from there, they decide, well, is this something that we want to open as a case? Is this something where we can write a letter to someone that will help this person? Is this something where we can maybe share some skills and strategies with this person that would help them resolve it on their own? Or is there an organization that has more expertise in that particular area that we can refer this person to, someone that we've worked with and that we trust? But legal services is only one part of our organization. Would you like me to tell you about the rest of it?
You know what, that would be great. But before we do that, you mentioned that it's disabilities, those that are seen and unseen. Would you expand a little bit more on the unseen disabilities?
Sure. When I think of unseen disabilities, those can include mental health disorders, severe and persistent mental illness, things like multiple sclerosis or fibromyalgia, things that affect people, even brain injuries. You can't always, that is not evident if a person has a brain injury, just to walk up to them and know. There are so many different ways that a person can have a life experience of something that limits their ability to live, work, learn, breathe, walk, talk, that it's a huge range.
Absolutely, because usually I think sometimes people usually think of disabilities as something physical that they see.
Exactly.
Or it's sight and hearing. But I think as a society, as a community, we forget that there's those unseen underlying health issues that are considered a
Yes.
disability.
Yes.
So, and I think it's important, right, to clarify for our community because that way they can connect it with the resources that someone might need. That,
Right.
oh, Disability Rights Nebraska will help with this. So thank you for clarifying that. But yes, I think it's important for them to know the rest of the services that you have.
We also, we do public policy work. So we gather information and provide data to lawmakers on issues that would affect persons with disabilities. I think we provided some information and background on the parking meter issue just recently. And we also do systemic work. So if there are systems in place that are becoming barriers for people with disabilities, we try to work, with the system to make adjustments so that everyone has equal access to the services and supports that they need. We have an education program called Inclusive Education Lay Advocacy, and this is relatively new, and it is a free training. It's 6 weeks in the spring and in the fall, and what our coordinator does is she spends time with volunteer advocates and trains them how to stand with families through the educational process. And so we have a lot of people like retired teachers or grandparents or parents who have a child with a disability in special education who take that training, and it helps them to advocate for their own child or family member, and then it also helps them to advocate for other people, and stand with other people. And the training is free, but they make a commitment to be available for a year to work with other families who come in who are in need of an advocate. So that has been very popular. We have gotten a lot of calls on. We always get a lot of calls on special education issues, but our funding doesn't always stretch to those issues. So this is another way of providing people educated advocates who have a little bit of background and the resources to help them through the individualized education plan in a school. One more area that I wanted to tell you about is our citizen advocacy program. There are 5 independent citizen advocacy offices across the state. There's one here in Lincoln, and we provide training and technical assistance for those offices. And what those offices do, it's very cool. It's a very small grassroots program, and the coordinator meets with people in the community, maybe a person with a disability who is at risk, so maybe they don't have much family around, or they don't have a big circle of friends, and they're in danger of maybe slipping through the cracks. So the coordinator would meet with that person, get to know them a little bit, and then they'd come back and look at their network of people and go, okay, who knows somebody, or who do I know that might be a good advocate for this person? And some of these relationships have lasted for 40 plus years. I mean, we've had advocates that have worked with proteges who end up becoming a member of the family, basically. So
Wow.
the point of that whole program is that the advocate is taking on that person's concerns as if they were their own. So
That sounds awesome.
it's very intensive, and so that's why it's small, because we're working there. The coordinators, those individual coordinators, are working with people on a very individual basis. So
Okay. And that's the program that's fairly new. No, I'm
No,
sorry.
lay advocacy is
Lay
the one.
advocacy.
very
And what is lay advocacy?
Excuse me. The Inclusive Education Lay Advocacy is the program where our lay advocacy coordinator trains parents or grandparents or other people, other concerned community members to stand with families
That's right.
in the schools.
That's right.
So,
Okay.
and that's helping families who have a child in special education so that their child can spend more time in the general classroom. And as one of my former coworkers used to say, education is not just about academics.
No.
It's also about learning those social skills.
Yes.
So
That is good to know.
yeah.
Is that a program where if somebody in our audience is watching and saying, that's what I need, they can reach out to you
Yes.
or
Yes.
to somebody at Disability Rights Nebraska and
Certainly.
get additional information for that?
Certainly. Yeah, it's certainly. So if a family is struggling, if they have a child in a special education program and they're struggling for one reason or another, if there's problems with the school or there's just not a good fit with the educational programming, they can reach out to us, and one of our case advocates will connect them with the lay advocacy program. And if you have a volunteer or somebody in your audience who is interested in becoming one of those lay advocates, we offer those trainings twice a year, and I know Pat would be thrilled to have someone reach out. But they can always go to our website and look up the Inclusive Education Lay Advocacy Program.
That is awesome. Which your information will be at the end of the program.
Yes.
We will have the website and phone number and address of Disability Rights Nebraska. So, I mean, you've talked quite a bit about the programming that the agency has. How can we as community citizens be supportive of Disability Rights Nebraska?
I think one of the biggest ways that you can be supportive of Disability Rights Nebraska is to educate yourself. There are, as we talked about, so many different kinds of disabilities and so many nuances to disability rights law that I think that any sort of education that you can do for yourself, it's kind of the best way. And we have a resources section on our website that has a great bunch of material. It's called Law in Brief.
Oh.
And it covers things like what are my rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act? What are my rights if I'm a landlord and someone wants to bring in a service animal or an emotional support animal? What are my rights as an animal owner? What are my responsibilities on either side of that? So
Right.
there are, the service animal and emotional support animal issue is one that is very confusing, and we've done our best to try. We have a special section on our website just for that, where people can go and kind of get some clarity on those issues.
Yes, and I think that's an issue that always comes up in our office about emotional support animals and your ADA animals. But yeah, you're right. And I didn't realize, I just learned as I'm listening to you that you actually have a section on that. That
Yes.
is great.
Yes. We also offer trainings on that. We offer trainings on things, on subjects like that. We also offer information on supported employment, if you've ever heard of supported employment. So people with disabilities wanting to work in the community rather than being in a workshop or an enclosed, a sub-minimum wage situation. We want people with disabilities to be able to work in competitive integrated employment. Sometimes that requires some support,
Right.
and that doesn't have to be very extensive. Sometimes it's very minimal. Sometimes it's a little more intensive, but it doesn't have to be costly or anything like that. So we provide information on that. Supported decision making is another issue that we think about on a regular basis. So if a person needs some help with, so if I need help with my car, I don't know enough about my car
Right.
yeah. So I'll call my brother, or I'll call my brother-in-law,
Right.
and I'll say, okay, guys, what do I do here? So they're basically part of my circle. What we're encouraging people to do is, instead of going directly to a full guardianship for a person with a disability,
Right.
that we encourage and help a person to develop their circle of friends, relatives, professionals, so they have someone to go to ask. Now, sometimes they may still there are situations where a full guardianship is still needed. That's understandable. And sometimes they may need help with medical decisions or with money decisions. Right. So there are specific tools you can use for them, but you can just use those tools and not have to limit all of those other rights. So that's supported decision making.
That is awesome. So if somebody from our community were to call, they can certainly, whoever answers the phone, they can ask those questions, get some additional information if they choose to.
Put us through, we can put them through to whoever. Usually the person who answers our phone will direct them to a case advocate, and if not to a case advocate, then to myself if it's a general question about training or information. And if I can't answer it, I can usually figure out which one of my colleagues it needs to go to that we can provide them with the support they need.
That is great. I've learned something today. I appreciate that about you, that you've taught me something today. And I hope our audience also has learned something today, because I think that as a community, we really don't know Nebraska Rights Disabilities. Disability Rights Nebraska. I always put the Nebraska in there first. And it's important. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. We will be adding that information at the end of the program today. Any questions, they can reach out to Sharon or to whoever answers the phone, right?
Right.
So thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
And so with that, remember, we all have rights.